Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at an Echo CS352 chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it's low on power. So with most of our repairs, the first thing we're going to do is look in the fuel tank. Certainly if it's full of water or pond scum, that would explain the low on power. But looking in there, the fuel looks really nice and I can't see any evidence of water in the bottom of the tank. So let's pop the hood and see what we got going on under here. The first thing I notice is that the plug wire is off. Now, that would certainly explain a loss of power, but let's take a closer look. When we pull the spark plug out, it turns out it's a brand new spark plug. So the customer tried replacing the plug to fix the problem and just didn't get the boot pushed back on there again. Because if that was the plug he was running when it was low on power, there would be evidence that it ran on that plug, right? So looking inside the cylinder, clean, shiny, no scratches or scores. We'll put that plug back in, get the boot tightened down, take another look. Let's just run this thing and see what kind of loss of power we're talking about here. Alright, so we ran it, it bogged, we squirted a little carb cleaner around the intake to see if there's any problems with the intake boot. We richened up the high and the low speed a little bit. It really didn't make a difference. So now we're pressure testing the fuel line, and the fuel line looks like it's holding at 10 pounds of pressure. When we pulled that old fuel filter out of there, we're replacing it with a new one. And you know, a plugged fuel filter can exhibit these kind of problems. So let's just put that fresh filter on there and try it again and see what we get. Okay, it's still bogging. It is definitely low on power. We confirmed the customer's complaint. It sure does not feel like an ignition problem, so we're going to dig into the carburetor and see what we got going on in there. Pretty simple to get this carburetor off of here. There is 3 screws that hold that plastic air filter adapter on and also hold the carburetor down. And we got our throttle linkage rod and our choke lever rod. Then we have our main fuel line that comes from the tank. We're going to plug that one off. And then we have a line that runs from the purge bulb to the carburetor. This pulls the fuel from the tank through the carburetor to the purge bulb and then return back to the tank. Our metering diaphragm, it's I mean, it works. It's getting a little bit on the stiff side. It certainly could be a contributing factor to our bog problem. So now we're going to look at the metering lever height. Now this must be a Walbro carburetor because I'm using the Walbro gauge right now. And if you look at the model number of the carburetor, the gauge is stamped with the various model numbers. And you just use the appropriate side of the gauge to measure the metering lever height. And in fact, the lever was set a little bit low, and I raised it up just a hair. And that could certainly be a contributing factor to the reason why I was bogging. Now this micro screen here, it's kind of skimmed over with some debris, and that most definitely could be a contributing factor to a bog. So we got 3 strikes already on this carburetor, and I think it's just a combination of all 3 of those things being off just a little bit that's creating this situation, because it does run, it just doesn't have power. It's not getting enough fuel. So here we're going to remove the limiting stops on the high and low adjustment. And we're doing that so we can pull those screws out and clean the passageway. This special tool has actually got bass backwards threads on it, and you thread it into the limiter, and then you can get a bite on it and pull it out. Right now I am bottoming the needle and counting the turns that it took to bottom it, writing it down here. What do we got? 3 1/4. So after I clean this and I go to put the screws back in, then I'll back them out to those settings, and we'll be in the same spot we were before we started, because you know, the saw ran when it was new, and it ran up until this point when there was a complaint. The screws weren't turned in or out. So the problem, you know, just richening up a screw in the middle of the season isn't usually the answer to the repair. There's usually some dirt or blockage going on. Now, if you're changing seasons and you're going from warm to cold, yeah, you might need to richen it up. So here we're putting in a new pump diaphragm and pump gasket. And watch, when I put the plate on here, I open up the throttle a little bit so that when I drop the plate down, the idle screw hitting the plate doesn't like throw off my alignment when I'm dropping a plate on there and make me bump the gasket and move it. So I always hold that throttle plate open so that the stop screw isn't touching it as I try to put the plate on. Now you'll notice here on the metering side, I put the gasket down first and then the metering gasket. And now we're going to put our high and low speed jets back in. We'll screw them down to the numbers we had written on the piece of paper. Or I should say we screw them down till they lightly bottom. And then we'll back them out those amount of turns. And make sure you lightly bottom those screws so you don't damage the tips of them. So now we're just going in reverse order. We'll put some fuel lines on. Yeah, that one doesn't seem to fit very good. Well, it isn't uncommon practice to just snip the end of a fuel line off that's in good shape. And just get a fresh spot on the hose there to push over the fitting so things are nice and snug. So now we're going to put our choke lever in place. And our throttle linkage. And the throttle linkage just gets snapped down into the throttle lever. Really pretty easy to work on. So that's all I have for you on the Echo CS352 chainsaw bog repair. Thanks for watching. Later.
Send it.